So I want to go over the top 5 things I wish I knew before I hit level 70. Basically the entire early to mid game. These tips would have extremely increased my progression because this took about 100 hours of gameplay. Now I could have done that way faster now, but I did spend a lot of time testing and messing around with certain things, and this is kind of what I've learned from that. So hopefully you all can benefit from it. If you have not already, be sure to sub. Only 13% of you are subbed, and I'm going to be pumping out a ton of D4 content. With that being said, let's dive into the first thing. So the first thing is I was a super big resource hoarder. I did not upgrade any of my gear, but in fact, you might notice in the bottom right, I have 7.7 million gold. I've had 0 problems respeccing constantly. I've had 0 problems with upgrading my gear, and I just had a ton of gold in my inventory. Not only that, but if I look and if I want to go ahead and try to upgrade my armor pieces here, you actually can see that I have a ton of resources except for the Forgotten Soul because I have not done a ton of Helltide, but every other resource I have a ton of, and that is because you just get a ton of loot. And in fact, I've stopped picking up stuff because it's a waste of time at this point. So my recommendation is when you reach things like World Tier 3, or you're trying to push towards World Tier 4, which I did at level 60, you should absolutely be upgrading your gear. Minimum when you're pushing those World Tier 3, World Tier 4, and when you first enter. Because at World Tier 3 and World Tier 4, what ends up happening is you get gear that you're going to be using for like 10, 20 levels. It's not like before 50 when you replace your gear every so often, like every level or so, honestly. This is a critical thing to remember because you get massive stat increasing. You get massive damage, massive armor, and both those things are critical to help you get more XP in those content. The next thing I wish I did early on was dungeon grind. Now this really kind of fits in also with my next 2 things that I wish I did. And the reason why we're dungeon grinding is not to grind out the aspects, but because it's actually just the best form of experience if your open world is kind of clogged, and on launch it absolutely will be. So if you're able to do open world, there's no one around, it's pretty good and actually has potentially better XP than dungeons and better loot. The problem is that you're going to have other players there messing you up, increasing the health, or just killing mobs in front of you so you don't have a smooth experience. Dungeon grinding is going to fix all that and give you a really nice pathway with the Tree of Whispers, which the Tree of Whispers is something you unlock after campaign, and it gives you bonus loot anytime you've acquired 10 Grim Favors, which will go ahead and you'll get every 2 dungeons another loot cache, which just give you a lot of legendary items that you can kind of target for your build, especially when you reach those world tier difficulty increases. You really can start getting some massive gear upgrades overall from farming dungeons. Along that note, I should have been farming nightmare dungeons, and I didn't really think about this at the time because I didn't really understand how the nightmare sigil system worked. But as you increase your nightmare sigils here, which I can craft, you will actually go ahead and increase the level of your enemies, which makes it harder. Not only the affixes that do some crazy things like the Helltide portals and such, but it will actually increase the levels of your opponent. However, at tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, the levels are roughly the same. They're a little bit higher, anywhere from roughly around that 50 to 60 range for world tier 3. But that's actually doable and not really that much slower than a normal dungeon if you're level 50 at World Tier 3 and you're able to complete those things. Because if you farm these, you're gonna get massive experience for your glyph sockets, and Paragon is one of the best ways to increase your power overall. So getting that XP early on, getting closer to that radius increase, and getting the standard damage increasings on your sockets is kind of just extra gravy on top because the dungeons aren't really slower at all, assuming again you get those lower tier ones. As you go higher and higher, it gets slower and slower. So I wouldn't recommend running the higher tier sigils and the higher tier dungeons, but you can easily craft some of the lower tier ones and then just run those as your dungeon grind. Now, the next tip is something that I might have done had I not been in the review build, because I would have had the maps for the altars of Lilith, but this is definitely something you're going to want to focus on, and that is getting your renown up before level 50. Why do I say before level 50? Because at level 50, you unlock the Paragon board, and if you've maxed out a map, which is somewhat doable if you have the altars around you, because the altars give you a ton of renown, then you get the Paragon points, right? So the moment you get to level 50, you'll have a bunch of Paragon points and you'll immediately be able to access a bunch of nodes. And these are huge damage increases, like crazy build defining options, especially with the glyphs, etc. So absolutely get your altars done. Hopefully we'll have maps by the time we get to that point in our campaign journey on launch. And if you do have those maps, run those altars and then immediately start doing side quests in combination with Tree of Whispers. Head to Tree of Whispers, start doing renown across each map, do those unique dungeons. Don't repeat dungeons, which I did a lot. Make sure you're going ahead and doing all unique dungeons to get those renown points, and just overall reach that Paragon points as soon as possible, because this is a really big increase at 50. Of course, the skill points are pretty big as well. Lastly, XP is the #1 priority after hitting 50. Before then, you can focus on renown to get some extra power. You can go ahead and do all that stuff. And if you haven't finished your renown, go ahead and finish your renown while focusing on XP, right? And the reason why XP is the #1 priority is because you get so much value out of additional Paragon points. And in general, a lot of stats kind of scale with the correlation between you and the opponent's level. For example, here, this amount of armor goes ahead and reduces physical damage taken by enemies of equal level by 46%. If the enemy's level is way higher than you, you're going to reduce a lot of that damage reduction that you could have potentially had, right? Of course, the more you level up, the less armor you kind of have in relation. But in general, leveling up is the #1 priority outside of finishing your renown early, because increasing your XP is going to get you closer to that world tier 4. And once you get to world tier 4, you can XP grind all the way to 100 to make sure you have all those Paragon points, all that good stuff. And overall, you just need XP to give yourself additional power. You're not going to find the best gear and min-max your gear during your leveling process, so there's no point in running things like Helltide zones, which I've already gone ahead and mentioned as a bad idea. I did a lot of Helltide zones because I was curious about them, and I just found them to be pretty worthless. So I definitely recommend focusing on XP, which means that, guess what? Run Nightmare Dungeons, run dungeons. Overall, getting XP is just a great way to go to get to that level 100 and just get as strong as you possibly can. Hopefully this was helpful. If it was, like the video, sub to the channel, and let me know how you are waiting for Diablo 4 if you cannot stand it. I know I got a little bit lucky because I got to play it, but I am definitely still excited to dive into the game once again. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all for the next one.